Hello, everybody. Good evening. Today is December 2nd, 2025. I hope that number one in the corner that's attending is Rhonda. If so, hello, Rhonda. First, before I begin, I always read the safe space parameters in the comments section. Welcome to my podcast, Dragonfly Discussions. You're welcome to enter your name and location, where you are from. I am thrilled you are listening, and I hope you enjoy this session together. Safe space reminder is please use your own safe space parameters around the chapters I read, which may arouse emotions or memories of your own. You're welcome to excuse yourself or stay. So some of the stuff I read may touch areas of your own life, and that's okay if you need to go and watch it later. That's why it's recorded. So don't worry about me. Take care of you. So we are in chapter 4. We are on page 148, subchapter Emmanuel. And just to catch everybody up, in case you're just catching in, I am now in a Christian rehab that is a long-term Christian rehab. It is all the way in Dover, Pennsylvania. And it's a cross-shaped ministry Christian program where it's all Bible-based, scripture-based. And so I've joined a bunch of teams. I've joined the choir team and all of these other teams because why not? And keep yourself busy and out of trouble and out of drama. So the Emmanuel phase is, they use Emmanuel because it's supposed to be your time of resting and reflecting. And I can't remember maybe I'll explain when I begin, but that's where we're at. So I'm now almost a year. I'm a year into the program. I've done my first 6 months or 3 months of the Alpha, 3 months of Omega. Then they make you do 1 month of Emmanuel, and then you do 6 months of RNO, where you're a staff. And then depending on where you fall with the 2 graduations, there's only an April graduation and an October graduation. So depending on your cycle, you may have to stay a little longer or whatnot. Mine was in October. And so I spent, literally, I got there and I spent an entire time. I spent about almost 18 months in this program. So Emmanuel is now the phase where I'm just kind of resting and listening to God and trying to find my direction. So the program had also chosen me to be like a spokesperson for the program. They put me in a story in the paper, and I was one of the success stories that they were sharing about. So this is all about that celebration, and then me going into Emmanuel. They celebrate you and do this celebration. So I was congratulated in front of all my peers and others that were in the same phase as me. I had completed the Alpha and Omega, which is the beginning and the end. That's if you study the Bible, the Alpha is the beginning and Omega is the end. That's also Greek. And Alpha is like the beginning of the Greek alphabet, and Omega is the last letter in the Greek alphabet. So it's Alpha, Gamma, Beta, Delta, Epsilon, Zeta, Eta, Theta, Iota, Lambda, Kappa, Mu, Nu, Xi, Omicron, Pi, Rho, Sigma, Tau, Phi, Su, Omega. So Alpha and Omega, that's the whole entire Greek alphabet. So I had completed Alpha and Omega classes and was about to enter into Emmanuel. Emmanuel was a phase where you spent resting in God's presence, listening to what he wanted for your future. It was a month where you transitioned from being a student to begin to take on responsibilities of a staff member status. That phase gave me a lot of time to read and write while learning about what the next phase, RNO, was about. I loved my Emmanuel time. And what RNO means is R is reentry and O is observation. So that's the staff part, is you're being staff over women who are re-entering, and you're kind of re-entering in a way. You're kind of staff over the girls that are coming in, and you're observing them. You're kind of teachers. You're monitoring their shower time, their chores, everything. So instead of a student being monitored, now you're monitoring new girls that are just under you. I was able to have so much time with God and actually sleep in my bed for as long as I wanted. I didn't have a strict schedule for once and was allowed to explore my options. So this program was so freaking strict. You could not spend time on your bed. You couldn't lay down on your bed. You could kind of sit up, but they did not want you on your bed. And if you got caught on your bed laying down, you could get in trouble. So that was really hard because there was a lot of time where you just wanted to sleep. We had such a strict schedule. We were up at like crack of dawn, and we had 7 minutes in the shower and prayer time, and then chores, and then more prayer time. And so the Emmanuel, we didn't have any of that. You got to just sleep in. There was nobody telling you what to do. You got to rest. You got to just really just sit and talk to God and listen to God. So I could truly listen and rest in God's presence. My favorite spot was under a big tree that was on the open grassy field, and the sky was always full of puffy white clouds. So out a lot of the entrances, we had a circular pathway, and you could walk down the pathway, and there was this huge green open field. And then there was this huge tree, and there was like these cool looking sit back chairs, right? And so I would sit in one of those chairs, and I'd have my CD player, CD player, with my headphones on and my CDs. And I would just read, or I would just listen to music and just look up in the clouds and just be amazed at all the beauty, and just reflect and just dream and ponder. And I probably was manifesting at that time, and I didn't even know what manifestation was until later in my life. But that's what I would do. I would just ponder and focus on my future and just what was ahead of me. So that was my favorite spot, was under that tree. I would bask in God's love and beauty all around me, growing within me. Hours would pass by, and before I knew it, I would have to go in for mealtime. The month went by like a flash. Before I knew it, I had entered RNO phase was here, and the RNO phase was here, and it meant being an actual staff to the girls below me. I still had moments where I thought about Mark. Mark was the boyfriend that I got arrested with. We fell in love through a rehab, and he was the best boyfriend I could still to this day say I've had. Praying and hoping that he was doing well. So when I got arrested, he got arrested. He was a parolee, so he went back to prison. In fact, he went back to Folsom prison. I luckily was on probation, and I got a second chance. Actually, a lot of chances, but I got a last chance to go into a rehab, or I was spending 5 years in Chowchilla prison. That was my final sentence. So I chose rehab. But he was off, probably in prison all this time, and I'm thinking about him and hoping he's doing well. By then, a year had passed, and word about Mark wasn't too positive. I had started thinking about my choices, so not too positive, meaning he was released from prison or jail, or maybe he didn't go back to prison, and he was back doing drugs. By then, a year had passed, and word about Mark was not positive. I started thinking about my choices and where I would spend my final months. Would it be Dover, Pennsylvania, where I clearly didn't want to stay, or was it Chicago, Illinois, at an intro center or another intro center? I was beginning to have visions and hopes about Chicago Intro Center, possibly working there as a staff member in my final RNO months. So what that is they give you an opportunity to choose where you want to spend your R&O phase as a staff member. So you could spend it I could have spent it back in Fresno because Fresno still had the center. I could spend it in Chicago. I could spend it in Dover, Pennsylvania. I could spend it over in New York. We had a center in New York, Maryland, West Virginia. I think there was 5 intro centers. Yeah, there was about 5 intro centers. So you could pick, you can kind of see which one fit you and which one God was telling you to go to. And so Chicago was where I wanted to go. And, okay, so during that time, Leroy's mother, so Leroy is my evil grandfather on my birth mother's side. He was always in my life as a violent, alcoholic, abusive, mentally abusive to me, psychologically abusive to me, never sexually or physically, but he was very physically violent to my grandmother. He probably was sexually abusive to my birth mother, maybe my aunt, I'm not sure, but he was a very evil man. So Leroy's mother passes away, which that's Leola. And Leola is also wicked, 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 wicked. He came from very wicked genes. So, so she passes and she removed all inheritance from my grandmother that she was to get from her marriage to Leroy. So this hurt my grandmother very badly. This is all my birth mom side of the family. So my grandmother, my great grandmother dies, and she leaves nothing in the will that can go to Marianne, my grandma. She leaves it all to Leroy. So that means like my grandma couldn't get any of that stuff, which was Leola had a lot of money. They were very rich in Visalia. Everything was to be left to Leroy. It, of course, hurt my grandma very much, who needed such inheritance. It hurt me too. But did my grandfather already pass away? I don't know. Leroy does pass away. Can't remember if I already talked about it, but I don't know. I don't really pay too much attention to that side of the family much. So everything was to be left to Leroy. It, of course, hurt my grandmother. Maybe he's still alive. No, I think he already passed. Yeah, he already passed. That's right. He already passed. Sorry. He already passed. And when I was in my intro, it was when I was in my intro that he passed. That's right. And right after I'd kind of made peace and forgiven him. So yes. So then Leola is alive, and she has the opportunity to, since her son's dead, she could give it to her son's wife, but she keeps my grandma out of everything. So that was the point there. It hurt me too to see my grandmother being so mistreated. However, the evil of Leroy was deep, and his mother was no different. My life continued with God as I prayed over Debbie. Debbie is my birth mother, who was still in and out of jail, and for my Aunt B, who is my birth mother's sister, who by this time believed herself to be a witch. So my aunt's now turning into a white witch. I finally finished with the Emmanuel phase, and it entered into the R&O phase, where I was an actual staff member over the students. There were 4 shifts we were responsible for. So they're kind of like R&O, the way I kind of looked at it, and it taught me a lot of discipline, but it reminded me of having a job, because you had these shifts, you had to be responsible for all this stuff, and it was just like a job. So it was easy, but it was I had to do it. But I could see how it could be really hard for some girls who didn't have those natural skills of holding down a job. Some of them slept on the job. Some of them didn't do their job. Some of them got in trouble for not doing their job. But I don't know. I just looked at it as a job. So there were 4 shifts we were responsible for. The early shift was 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. The day shift was 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. The evening shift was 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And the night shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. You did not want the night shift That was such an awful, I hated that shift. It was very rough, but I considered it a job. The ladies were not the most respectful to the staff and didn't always want to obey our instructions. It was a lot more like babysitting than a job. Therefore, we had to take their misbehavior with love and correct them kindly. Oh, yeah, did they try to push and pull and sneak around and do things? Thinking that we're just passed out asleep. I stayed awake. I just walked the halls and checked everything and just walked and I don't know. I kept busy. It was eerie down in the basement. Oh, we had to take our flashlights and make sure everything was locked and check the doors. And I didn't like going down the basement. I mainly walked in accordance with what God wanted me to do and what his word said, which usually worked out in my favor with the students as I was the student staff. By then, I had made my decision about where to go after the month was over. I had chosen Chicago. I felt deeply in my spirit that Chicago was where I should spend my final months leading up to my graduation in October. I couldn't wait to tell everyone, especially my family. During that month, I began to work towards my 4-day pass. The program allows ladies to go home for 4 days if they or their families can afford it. It's much like the 12-hour pass, although for much longer, of course. So now, if my parents are willing to bring me back home for 4 days, and this is a really risky thing, and some girls don't go back. They play the system and they use that 4-day pass and they go back to wherever they were in trouble with, and they sometimes never come back. So to have the opportunity and to really spend this time 4 days with your family is incredible. It's incredible, but you have to come back. The agreement is you have to come back and graduate, or else you are not successfully finished the program. That wasn't the case with me. I was not going to leave the program just for 4 days with my family and just escape. But it was pretty neat. I was thrilled and couldn't wait to call my parents and talk to them about it. I had a lot of things I needed to take care of at home, such as my legal and license issues. I also wanted to check on Mark, see my grandma, and take care of other things that I had left unsolved when I was arrested that awful night in 2004. So there's all this stuff that I need to clean up, right? And 4 days, I had pretty much arranged and worked on these things like getting my license back, going back to court, um, checking in with my last landlord where we just abandoned our apartment and just left him with a mess to clean up. So it was important to me that while I was there, that I took care of business, not just partied or had fun or whatever. My parents kindly purchased a ticket, which cost them $600. But when I gave so that's a round trip, $600. That sounds so cheap. That is so cheap. But yeah, it was $600, which to me back then that was a lot. But when I gave the flight information to the program director, she was not happy with me. She saw the schedule of when I was leaving and arriving back. She accused me of being selfish because the times were very early and very late, which would cause staff to be up early and late. It wasn't like I did it on purpose, and I tried to explain to her that. She didn't want to hear anything I had to say and decided to punish me. So me and my family, we figured the earliest flight out would land me there the earliest, and I would have the most time with everyone. So it wasn't something manipulative or evil, but they punished me. I was ordered to be up at 3 a.m. and write scriptures on obedience and sacrifice 25 times each. Even though I felt she was unfair, I accepted my punishment wholeheartedly, giggling as I walked out of her office door. I knew I had done nothing wrong and that God knew my heart wasn't in the wrong place. I was still going home for 4 days and I still had Chicago waiting for me. In the days leading up to my trip home for the 4 day pass, I had to get my shifts covered by other staff members while I was gone, just like a job. You have to get your shifts covered, or, if you're in that kind of work, you have to get your shifts covered. But thankfully, I was able to get all my shifts covered and I was able to go on my trip. So we are page 151 by the miracle of God. Finally, April 20th, 2006 arrived. My 4 day pass moment was here. I took my flight back home to Fresno, California on my own. So now this is like the first time I've traveled on my own. I'm all on my own. I have all the temptations that I could possibly imagine. I could get drunk. I could smoke a cigarette. I could, if I wanted to, probably meet a man and run off with him. I could never come back. I could do all kinds of things, right? I am not in their control. There's no staff member chaperone with me. I am literally on my own. So I'm without staff, other students. It's just me, and I was ready. God, I was so ready. I wasn't tempted by anything while I waited at the airport between flights. I saw and visited with people that were around me. I ate delicious food and watched real TV for the first time in over a year. Oh my God, I remember that. I remember that because you couldn't watch anything but Christian TV, Christian shows, Christian music, the Bible, right? So I remember I'm like, oh, I'm watching real live news. Like, this is real TV. Like, oh my God, that's so funny. Oh, the little things that you really miss. I mean, I don't watch a lot of TV anyways now, but like I remember that. And I remember seeing people like strangers, like, and hearing conversations and being like, it was so like magical. I remember just looking at everything and everything was just so vibrant and like new. And like, it was so cool. That was so cool in the airport traveling home. So how I talk about it. It was so surreal that I was actually free from the program and sitting at an airport about to go home. I was about to see everyone for longer than just 12 hours. I thought about everything that I wanted to do and prayed to God that it would all go well, especially with my legal issues. I told myself, if I can't learn to stand here in this airport with God and take what the program has taught me, then how will I stand when I get home? Or stand when I'm released permanently in October? So it was like this mighty, mighty test, right? I looked around and realized that God was with me everywhere I went, that I was truly strong, healed, and whole again. I smiled at myself, proud of what I had accomplished since February 2005. I looked back at who that girl was then. I didn't recognize her at all and almost cried in gratitude for truly changing me from within. And I have tissue this time. You might as well get your tissue too. The time came to board my flight and I couldn't wait. The flight seemed to take forever, but soon we landed in Fresno and I was home once again. I grabbed my bags and found my parents. They were so happy to see me, and I was keeling. Oh, I was keeling over Angley. I don't remember using that word. I wouldn't use that word. That was probably my ghostwriters chose that word. And I was keeling over Angley to see them. They helped me with my bags and we went home. I got to stay with my parents at the Harrison house. By that time, And that's the house I grew up in, the Harrison house here in Fresno. By that time, they had changed my old bedroom into an office for my father, but my sister's room was still the same as it was in high school. So I stayed in my sister's room. I remember sleeping like a baby that night in her bed. It was so plush and big with pillows and sheets that it smelled like home. Like, oh, when you walked in the Harrison house, like, you know how you just smell that home smell, that all the fragrances, the sheets, the mattress, like everything smells like home. Like it was, and then my parents always had like these big, huge, plush beds, like the softest mattresses and up high, and it was very nice. We had nice stuff. So I slept like a rock, like a queen. I melted in that bed every night. The next morning, I woke up to have breakfast with my parents and we discussed the plans. I took a shower, got ready for the day, and began to make some important phone calls. I made a phone call to the DMV regarding my license and was informed about the process of how to attain my license again, which meant a day in front of a judge and a sentence. When I was in my final accident in 2001, I was charged with a felony DUI, and I lost my license entirely. So what had happened in 2001, that was actually, it was the day that the Twin Towers had gotten attacked. It was 9/11/2001. And I decided to leave as I watched the Twin Towers. The first tower had just collapsed. The first airplane ran into it, and that one was coming down, and I decided to go. And I couldn't believe what was happening, but I went racing across the west side at like 80 miles per hour through town. And I'm high on drugs, and I hit head on with another drunk driver. He was drunk. So that caused me to get a felony DUI because I had hurt him. I didn't kill him. We both survived, but he was hospitalized and I was hospitalized as well. I cut my head open right here to the brain. And so they charged me with a felony DUI. I've come a long way. That was pretty scary. I knew I had some work ahead of me in that particular area. I also called the city college where I lived off financial aid, but had dropped out and failed to keep my financial aid commitment. I was concerned that I had to pay it all back. However, my debt was cleared somehow. This is another weird miracle that I don't understand how that happened. So when you're on financial aid and you don't go to school and you don't perform the grades and you don't finish, then basically the government's like, you owe us that money back because you were supposed to go to school and do something with that money. So I thought I was in a lot of trouble and was going to have to owe. I mean, we got a lot of money off of financial aid. It was really nice. And the kids do. The students deserve it. Financial aid is really nice. It helps you out a lot with your education. So however, somehow the debt was cleared. And all I owed them was $71. I was like, I should owe you thousands. I was amazed. What a miracle. I also called my old landlord where Mark and I lived in that beautiful apartment in Clovis. So Mark and I, my boyfriend in where I met him in rehab, we decided to run from the law and ditch our apartment in Clovis. We had a beautiful loft apartment. Oh my God, it was so cute. The chalet apartments in Clovis, they're so cute off of Minnewawa. So we had left all of our stuff, like just abandoned our couch, our bed, most of our clothes, like our dishes, everything. So the landlord had to clear all that out, probably auction all that off. So I wanted to get things settled there. So me and Mark, we had bailed on the landlord at that apartment when we packed up in the middle of the night and decided to run from the law. We left furniture, clothes, and the majority of our belongings behind in that apartment. So I owed him an apology. Dan, the landlord, answered, and he remembered me. How could he not? I told him how sorry I was and explained to him what happened. He knew something was wrong with us, but didn't know how to help us. He told me that the police broke into the apartment and busted down the door looking for us. He said that they did damage to the place and that he had to spend a lot of money cleaning up the place. Thank you, police, for doing damage. You really could break and enter and maybe be a little more polite to things or pay for it. Or how about the Fresno police pay for it? If you're going to do the damage, you should pay for it. Or we should pay for it. Put restitution on the criminals. Don't. It's just terrible. Terrible what they did to him. And what I did to him, too. It's basically all my fault. I felt terrible and asked him if I could repay him in some way. All he said to me was, you calling me and apologizing to me is enough. And to hear you doing well is all I need. I again was amazed by another miracle God was gracing me with. I told him, thank you very much, and hung up the phone. Really? Like, that is so kind. It was so kind. It was unbelievable. Most people would cuss you out. They would cuss you out. That night we went to my brother's house, stepbrother. We went to my stepbrother's house to visit him, his wife, and his daughter. We went to Me and Ed's Pizza, my father's favorite. That was our family favorite, Me and Ed's Pizza. I still love Me and Ed's Pizza. I was in heaven to be in the presence of my family again. It was almost like I had never left. We ate, laughed, and talked about the baseball game plans for the next night. Our town had built a beautiful baseball stadium downtown where AAA baseball teams play, and other activities happen as well. My family took me to a Grizzly baseball game. Grizzlies are Fresno's AAA team, so that was a pretty big deal for a AAA baseball team to come into Fresno. Downtown spent a lot of money on that. And it's a beautiful stadium. If you ever get to watch a game there or go to an event there, it's beautiful. And it's got all of downtown skylight, city light, all the skyscrapers. Well, not really that big skyscrapers, but all the tall buildings downtown are all in the background as you're sitting in the seats. So you're watching the game and you can see the whole city. It's really cool. The next morning, I had to get up to appear in court before the judge. Because my charges were mainly drug-related, I was originally placed in a program called PCDC, Post-Conviction Drug Court. It was designed to keep drug offenders out of jails or prisons for minor crimes and offer them drug treatment instead. It was very successful, and I was a part of that program when I was first charged in 2002 for drug possession. I'm so grateful for PCDC. I think it's still going around now. It's a very, very successful program. It keeps people out of jails and prisons because that's not rehab, that's not reformative, that's not restorative. And it really puts you in these other programs, drug programs, inpatient, outpatient. And it's just, it saves you out of incarceration. Because once you spend too much time incarcerated, you lose touch. You start to become institutionalized. And that's not something anybody wants to become. The new charges I received in 2005 were still a part of the underlying program. Therefore, I needed to return to the judge and inform the court of my success so far in the New Life for Girls program. Let's see. I remember it as if it was yesterday. I was sitting in that courtroom waiting to be called up to see Judge Cisneros, who knew me all too well from the days in courtrooms, unfortunately. I had been on a revolving door inside her courtroom, in and out, in and out, in and out. So she knew who Cheyenne Jenvey was. She recognized me and smiled. When my name was called, I couldn't wait to go up to the judge and talk to her. I walked up to her full of smiles and joy, not really up to her. You go just up to like this little podium that's like, I don't know, maybe 20 yards from the actual judge, but you're close. You have to go up and appear before the judge. She was speechless and took a moment to collect her thoughts. I could tell it was emotional, not only for me, but also for her. We said hello, and she began her process of reviewing my case and accepted the program I was still in. She told me how proud she was of me and finally getting the help I needed, how beautiful I looked, and how strong I was to have made it this far. So I'm really making her proud, and I could tell, and we both were just like, it was a really beautiful moment to see her. She was a really beautiful judge. She told me how not many make it out and get the chance to leave drugs for good, but that I actually did. The whole courtroom clapped and cheered for me. I took my chance to thank her for never giving up on me and seeing my potential. I turned to the other people waiting for their turn to be called. So everybody in that courtroom, all the people behind me waiting to go before the judge, they're all a part of this drug program. They're all struggling. They're all suffering. They're all in and out of that courtroom as well. They all have their own addictions. So I turned around and I spoke to them right then and there. I spoke to them. I turned to the other people waiting for their turn to be called. Everyone in there was an addict of some kind. And I told them never to give up hope, to turn to God for true help and deliverance. Then I turned back to the judge as she smiled at me again and gave me my court papers. Although I had shown my progress to the judge, I was still mandated to the 5-year prison sentence if I didn't return to New Life for Girls and successfully graduate in October. I felt really proud of myself as I left the courtroom that day. So again, like I was saying earlier, some girls took the chance on this 4-day and they didn't go back, and they defied their orders. And I'm sure they went right back to jail or prison. Well, 5 years in Chowchilla prison was waiting for me. And all I needed to finish was 6 months. So I wasn't about to mess up. I knew I had made Judge Cisneros very happy, and that made me happy. I was feeling the change of God within me, and it was incredible. There I was downtown. So downtown Fresno was a very bad place. I had begged for change there. I had scored drugs down there. I rode the bus. I worked at the Hall of Records right next door to the courthouse and was high on heroin. I was on food stamps and food assistance at the CDSS office across the street from the courthouse. And then I would sell my food stamps for cash and get drugs on the west side. So this was like the first time I'd been downtown, and I was with my dad. And it was just, I wasn't bothered. I was kind of like, had like an epiphany moment. So there I was downtown, where I begged people for change and was overwhelmed by the change in me. I had truly changed. No longer did the horrible, nightmarish memories of my drug addiction days bother me. No longer did stores, streets, neighborhoods bothered me or reminded me of the ugly person I once was. It was like the chains were broken off of me from all of what drugs tried to do to me. Drugs kept me bound and imprisoned. Drugs took away all my sense of self-worth, happiness, and peace. Drugs took away my relationship with God, my family, and my friends. No longer did the demon of drugs have a hold on me. My father, who also expressed how proud he was of me, took me home, and my mother took me shopping. So it was like really a pivotal moment for me to be back in that area of town. So my stepmother loved to shop and was good at spending money. She still is. So she took me shopping to celebrate. She did her usual shopping for groceries and such, but then she took me shopping for clothes and items for my time in Chicago. My mother was the best to shop with. My stepmother, was the best to shop with because she didn't look much at price tags. She was so filthy rich, she didn't have to even look at price tags. Like, seriously, she would just buy whatever she wanted. She just enjoyed freely spending her money, which she worked very hard for. She did. She worked really hard for, and she spent it. Um, Later that night, we left for the Grizzly game, and my father was so excited. My father was still the big kid I knew him to be, and he still loved life to the fullest. My dad literally, like, he loved life. He loved games. He loved barbecues. He loved swimming. He loved the fireworks. He loved holidays. He loved traveling. He loved vacations. He loved his family. He loved animals. He loved decorating. He loved gardening. I mean, he loved everything. So we ate hot dogs and drank sodas till we couldn't anymore and cheered on for our team. I went to bed thanking God for his many blessings and miracles so far. My heart was overflowing with gratefulness and happiness. So now we're on page 156. We're about 15 minutes left, so hang in there. We're not going to finish chapter 4. Sorry, I thought we would. Page 156, subchapter Grandma Oh Mine. So this is my grandma on my birth mom's side, which that's the chaotic, chaos, alcoholic, dysfunctional side of my life. It was day 3 of my 4-day pass, and time was going by so fast that I felt I didn't have enough of it. I wanted to stay so badly, but I knew that I must go back to Pennsylvania and then to Chicago. It was the day when I had to head. It was the day when I had. I skipped a sentence. I woke up in my bed one morning feeling a little different than usual. It was the day when I had to head to Visalia to see my grandmother and all of Debbie's side of the family. Debbie is my birth mom. She has not ever been a good mom. I would see Aunt B, that's her sister, Uncle K, that's her brother, and Debbie, my natural mom, of course. I lay there in bed and stared up at the ceiling. I began talking to God, asking him to protect me and guide me while I was with those people. So I knew that these people were not very healthy, and it was kind of uncomfortable, probably going to be with them, and they might be under the influence or a little cuckoo. So I was a little nervous. For some reason, I felt afraid and nervous inside, yet I felt confident enough in the change within me to handle the next visit. I slowly got ready for the day, as my parents knew I wasn't the most excited to see these people. But I was excited to see my grandmother after so long. She and I had been writing letters the whole time, and we also talked on the phone as much as possible when I was away. So we couldn't wait to see and hug each other again. I called her to let her know I was on my way, and she was thrilled with the anticipation of my arrival. So my grandmother and I were really close. I mean, her and I were like buddies growing up when I was a kid. Like, her and I played everything together. Like, she literally was such a vibrant, fun, active grandma. We did puzzles, paints, rode bikes. We hunted. We watched the New Year's ball drop every single year. She would stay up till midnight with me. I mean, we had so much fun. We would play in the backyard. We would paint. We would play with the animals. She and we had a really, really cool relationship. She was just really fun. So we were very close, and we would talk, and she would write to me all the time. The time came when my parents drove me to Visalia to my grandmother's house, where I would spend the night and return to Fresno the next day. Memories of the drive came back to me as we passed the truck stop where I was exchanged from one car to another, only to endure hell afterwards. My stomach began to turn, and I took a deep breath as I looked out the window. I focused my attention on talking to God. I began to ask God to protect me, give me guidance with each person, and let me act in love towards most of them, or act in love towards them most of all. Neither did I want to cause any type of disruption nor let anyone cause disruption within me. It was important for me to represent God in the best possible way and the change He had done within me. I wanted them to see the beauty of God and draw closer to Him too, if possible. So what I mean by the drive, that's the experience back in, I think it's chapter 1, might be chapter 2-ish. I might talk to about it. But the drive is when I was a little kid and I would go from Fresno to a midpoint where I'd meet my grandparents, and then I'd jump in their car, and then they would take me back to Visalia or Exeter. And when I would go as a kid to Exeter, that was when a lot of hell would happen because my grandfather was such a violent alcoholic. So I called it this drive because it was I knew what I was going to probably experience. Then I knew coming back, I was going to be relieved that I was away from such a horrible experience. So that's why I titled chapter 2, Normal versus Chaos, because I lived in normalcy with my dad and the chaos with my birth mom. And so the drive would go from normal to chaos. And so that's what I called it, the drive. That I had to, because I had visitations with my birth mom and my birth mom side of the family like every other weekend. It was just, that's the way I did it. And I never told anybody about the abuse that I was going through. So I endured many, many years of that drive and many bad weekends. So that's what the drive is all about. So it was Debbie's side of the family, and everyone was broken. And a lot of deep-rooted issues that went further than just Leroy. That's my grandfather. The drive seemed too quick, and before I knew it, we were there. My grandmother, as always, was out front waiting for us to come down the road. Her house sat at the end of a long row of houses that once you got to the end of the block, you directly went into her driveway. There she was, my beautiful grandmother, smiling ear to ear with her pearly whites showing. Her hair was done up pretty, and she was dressed in her best outfit. When I jumped out of the car, I immediately ran into her arms. We hugged each other tightly and cried as we looked at each other. She told me how pretty I looked, and I told her the same. My grandmother was always so pretty to me, even though there was so much pain and suffering behind her smile and kind eyes. She took my parents and me inside to visit for a little bit. She hadn't seen my father and mother in quite a while, too, and was excited to see them along with me. She always called my dad Donnie. She always nicknamed him Donnie. My dad's name is Don, but she would always call him Donnie. Donnie and Linda. Linda is my stepmom. But she'd always call him Donnie. She talked about losing Leroy, and we listened attentively. Then my parents had to leave, and I had to stay. So I said my goodbyes to my parents, which was quite hard. I felt like that frightened little girl again, saying goodbye to her parents at the truck stop, even though I was at my grandmother's house. Leroy was dead, and I had God. So I still was nervous. Like it was just all that trauma, you know. My grandmother and I waved my parents goodbye as they drove back to Fresno, and then walked inside the house. She and I hugged again and looked at each other with big smiles. I was so happy to see her. My grandmother was my best friend growing up, and she never stopped writing to me. I had hurt her too, and used her for money to buy drugs with. I sat down and apologized to her for all that I had done. She forgave me quickly and said she understood. Then she changed the subject to our plans for the day ahead. We were going to Uncle Kay's house, where Aunt Bee and Debbie were. I knew of the arrangements ahead of time and who I would be seeing, but it still made my stomach turn. Like I should be excited to see these people, but I was nervous. So I'm going to try and read one more subchapter because it's 7:51. And then how much do we have? Okay. Yeah. Because that's going to finish the next time we get together. So, okay. Page 159, subchapter Forgiveness. My grandmother drove us to my Uncle Kay's house, which is my birth mom's brother. We walked in and immediately my Uncle Kay gave me a huge hug. He was truly the only person I was excited to see. Because my Uncle Kay and I were buddies too. Like we were closest in age. I think we're about 5 years apart. Whereas my Aunt B was older and then obviously my mom. But he was a hoot and he was just a little rascal with me. And so he was the most normal of the, of the dysfunctional family. I was nervous about Debbie, my birth mom, and Aunt B. Debbie was still doing stints in jail and was certainly not sober. So my birth mom's not sober and she's in and out of jail. Aunt B, who's into witchcraft now and believes she was a true witch, and she's also not sober. Uncle K was the only normal one, but he wasn't sober either, but he was a little more normal. I made my rounds and hugged everyone that was excited to see me. We ate a simple meal of barbecued hamburgers and side dishes. Then I shared with them all about the program and what had happened to me. I attempted to share about God and how I had changed because of him. I showed how delivered I was from drugs and had zero desire to ever return to heroin or any kind of substance. Excuse me. They were all very happy for me. Then I went to each person and made my apologies individually. Of course, each person was different in my amends, but it was essential to clear the air with them and at least try to forgive them for myself and for my success. So you ask for forgiveness, not necessarily, it's not about them. It is about them, but it is really more about you and your recovery when you ask for forgiveness, because it's important to get that off your chest so you're no longer holding any of that guilt. If they choose not to forgive you, that's on them. But at least you've done your part to try to make amends, and you've said and made your peace and owned up to what you did. And that is huge. That is huge for anybody's ability to stay sober and to continue to stay sober. And anytime, it's always good to just own up to it and admit it. And if they don't want to forgive you, well, that's their choice. But at least you did your part to clean up your side of the street. Keep your side of the street as clean as possible, and you just might stay sober. So where I was. Okay, God was leading me to have those hard conversations with some of the people who were my very demons as a child, like Debbie and my Aunt B, but I did it. My Uncle K had marijuana and alcohol out in the open, but I wasn't bothered by it all. I knew the change God had done in me and I wanted none of those substances in my body. It seemed like the day lasted forever. Yeah, I really wanted the day to be over, as all I wanted was to go back home to my grandmother's house where I felt safe. They then brought out gifts for me to open, much to my surprise, because they weren't very wealthy at all. This side of my family is very, very poor. They got me clothes and other things that I would need for my next journey to Chicago. I was really grateful for all the efforts they made for me and thanked everyone for everything. They didn't have much money, and they did a lot for me to have a nice family visit. It really was nice to see everyone again. We said our goodbyes then, and my grandmother and I headed back to her home. As we rode in her car, I prayed to God for my family members on Debbie's side of the family, including my grandmother sitting beside me. I prayed for their souls and that God would protect them, love them, guide them, and reveal himself to them as he did with me. I knew I had to apologize for my actions and forgive them in essence. I felt like I accomplished that. However, I still felt separated from them in spirit. I could feel that they didn't know God like me. They didn't have a beautiful relationship with him like I always did. I still had a love for them in my heart and offered them up to God. I asked God to take care of them. So I basically just said some prayers over them and just kind of gave them up to God. Um, but it was very emotional to have to see all of them like that, and not changed and just not wanting to change. So we're gonna stop. I'm making a note. Um, so thank you. That was almost done with chapter 4. We got just a little bit left to go. We're going to finish chapter 4 on next Tuesday, December 9th. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I had an interesting one, but we're getting close to Christmas, which is my favorite holiday, and I'm excited about that. So we're going to be meeting on the 9th, the 16th, and then the 23rd. If you're in town or if you want to catch me on your phone or wherever you're at out of town, I would love that. And then on the 30th, we're going to be together, and that's going to be kind of it's not going to be reading from the book. It's actually going to be 2025 reflections. So I'm going to kind of go through some reflections that I've been through. And it's just kind of a thing that I do every year. I always ponder my past year, and then I set forth my future intentions for the next year. So I think that's a good practice to do. So we're going to end now at 7:57. I appreciate you being with me. Have a wonderful week. Thank you, Rhonda, if you're still here. And thank you, anyone who supports me on Dragonflies and Demons, and whoever wants to buy my book. It's available on Amazon. It's available at Barnes & Noble. You can actually do a Google search of Cheyenne Jenvey, and it will come up with pages of platforms of where you want to buy my book. It might be Goodreads. It might be Ingram Spark, maybe. It might be anything else. You don't have to choose the most popular ones that I mentioned, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So thank you for subscribing and listening and supporting me, and I hope you have a wonderful evening and a wonderful week. Bye!